Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So let me make sure I am up. Big shout out to Grant Cameron for coming on. I appreciate him for coming on. Hard Bastard is going to come on next week. Good, my levels are fine. On Monday at 7 p.m. And this was my fault. I got really ill last night. And yeah, I got really ill last night. I ate something that didn't agree with me. I was up for hours getting sick. When I finally took something this morning, it knocked me out. I was in and out all day. I think I woke up maybe at 2. I blinked. It was 5:50. In which case, it threw off the interview for Grant Cameron. And Grant couldn't do it at a later time. So, HB, I'm so sorry, dude. I really appreciate you switching the time frame. That's the first part. The second part, I want to thank everyone who showed up for the prior show. I appreciate Grant coming on. I do some of this particular coverage because we brought this stuff into the news now, and I find this to be somewhat of an interesting topic. And relevant. I mean, shit, it's in the news. They're leaking this stuff going all the way into 2018. I don't have this mental block and this mental barrier, nor do I have this fixed idea of the world that some people who are somewhat set in their ways has. I am perfectly open with talking to people who I don't necessarily fully agree with, or who I actually find to be fucking fascinating. This channel is mine, and I understand not necessarily liking all of the content, and that's fine. But this channel is indicative of me. So the stuff that I have on the channel is indicative of me, the things that I like, the things that I find interesting. 99 or 95% of that is probably going to be politics. There will be 5% of other stuff. So, just saying. As for, yeah, I think that's everything. First, thank you to everyone, all the people who like, share, view the content. You guys are fucking awesome, and I absolutely appreciate it. So that's the first part. And the second part, let's hop across the pond. So, apparently while I was incapacitated, while I was unconscious, a few developments have taken place over in Britain. Britain has expelled the Russian diplomats. There has been no investigation. There's been no real investigation. She's expelled the diplomats. Theresa May has come to a conclusion. It's very likely that it's from Russia, and has therefore, within a day, expelled the diplomats. She didn't like the response from Russia. She called it sarcastic and something else, that they don't understand the gravity of what they're saying. I'm going to show the thing. I just want to make a point. There was a sarin gas attack in Syria. Donald Trump comes out and says, I saw the dead babies. I saw the dead babies. It hurt me to my heart to see those dead babies. And I needed to do something as Donald Trump. So Donald Trump called for an airstrike in Syria. Now, he saw, between the sarin gas attack and between Donald Trump doing a strike, it was one day. One day. They didn't wait for an investigation. They knew, maybe 2 days, but you get my point. Don't miss the larger point. They didn't do an investigation. They didn't wait to see what was the real reason for those quote-unquote dead babies. Even Obama in that first airstrike, sarin gas attack, they don't wait to see what takes place. Now, in the first case, Obama was pulled back from the brink, meaning they didn't allow him to actually do that strike. The American public flipped out. The British public flipped out. In which case, Obama pulled back and allowed this thing of getting rid of their stores of sarin. In the second case, Donald Trump says, oh my God, they've dropped another sarin gas attack. Assuming, mind you, that the first gas attack belonged to Syria. There's evidence that showed that first gas attack did not necessarily belong to Syria, but it didn't matter. At this point, it's in the public consciousness that Syria did it, even though the public doesn't really know if Syria did it. And right off the bat, he uses that as a proxy to, they did the first gas attack. They've done another gas attack. I can't take these dead babies. Mind you, Donald Trump has already killed a lot of dead babies. He's already killed a lot of babies. Even on his first airstrike alone, he murdered children and babies. But this very specific way a dead baby died, it bugged him to his heart, and he needed to do a missile strike. Do you know, in February 2018, Mattis came out saying, yeah, we don't really have any evidence that Syria dropped that gas attack. I showed this article the other day. We don't really have any evidence that that gas attack came from Syria. We have no idea. It didn't stop Donald Trump from striking Syria. It didn't stop the media from jumping on this idea that Syria did this very specific thing. I mean, after all, supposedly they did the first thing that the public doesn't really know if they did the first thing. Donald Trump didn't even have an investigation when he did that Syrian strike. And now you find out months later, yeah, we really don't have any evidence showing that they did this. I'm trying to make a point. The UK has decided to kick out Russian diplomats over that spy and his daughter getting killed. Russia has threatened retaliation for doing so. Let's listen to Theresa May.
The opportunity to provide an explanation, but their response has demonstrated complete disdain for the gravity of these events. They have provided no credible explanation that could suggest they lost control of their nerve agent. No explanation as to how this agent came to be used in the United Kingdom. No explanation as to why Russia has an undeclared chemical weapons program in contravention of international law. Instead, they have treated the use of a military-grade nerve agent in Europe with sarcasm, contempt, and defiance. So, Mr. Speaker, there is no alternative conclusion other than that the Russian state was culpable for the attempted murder of Mr. Skripal and his daughter, and for threatening the lives of other British citizens in Salisbury, including Detective Sergeant Nick Bailey.
Just to be clear, and I know I'm playing devil's advocate here, but I'm playing devil's advocate because it doesn't seem like there's a devil's advocate. And I've been alive long enough. I know I don't look 40, but I am 40. I've been alive long enough to see when, just in my own lifetime, in the last few years, in the last administration, that politicians, governments say things that are often not necessarily true, and you find out after the fact that they were either lying or they were incompetent or some combination of both. Everything she's saying here could be true. Everything she's telling you here could be false. The other day, yesterday, she said they were likely. Now today, she's saying this is somewhat of a matter of fact. Which one is it? Do you know or don't you know? Are you blaying this up? What I'm asking here is somewhat a little bit more fundamental. She's making this point of there is no other point but Russia. There is no other conclusion but Russia. They have this nerve agent, and because they have this agent, it is from them. They didn't give us an explanation on why this will be used here. And they're looking at this without giving the gravity, meaning they don't get the gravity of what's taking place, and they're regarding with this with a certain amount of sarcasm. The other solution, or the other answer is possibly, if they didn't do it, and you've been getting blamed for some of everything that's going on in Europe and the United States, Russia is attacking us, Russia is attacking us, Russia's did another 9/11, Russia's did another Pearl Harbor. If this is what you're getting constantly from the United States, and you know that the Russian nonsense is bogus and is bullshit, if you know that, how are you going to take another country that's a client state of the United States coming across saying something very similar under this very similar rhetoric? How? The United States, the CIA had planned on bombing an envoy of Cubans and attacking Florida, real or simulated, in order to give a pretext and in order to go into Cuba. I am not beyond governments making shit up. That's where my cynicism lies. It has nothing to do with Russia. It has nothing to do with anybody else. It has everything to do with are they telling you the truth? Are they being straightforward? Has governments in the past got information out to the media and to the world that was wrong? And the answer, of course, is yes. Have they done things in the past to get information out that was completely disingenuous and they knew they were being disingenuous? That answer is yes. That answer is yes. You have not even had an investigation. What they ask you for, they didn't respond to you with cynicism. They didn't respond to you with sarcasm. Yes, they did, to some degree. They called it a circus. But what they asked you for, they said they wanted to see the results of the test themselves. They wanted part of the chemical element themselves. They wanted to review it. Yeah, If you were in any court of law, you would have to have the other person there, the other defendant, to be able to interrogate the evidence in the same way you're interrogating the evidence. They ask you for something basic. That's all I'm saying. I'm skeptical of this until I actually see the information and the evidence showing that what she's saying is true. She is asserting this stuff. She's not giving you anything. She's telling you, this is what the British government says. This is what the British government thinks. The other government who she's pointing a finger at says, well, shouldn't you also give us what you're using to come to the determinations that you're coming to? We can't just assume that your determinations are correct. We want to see it for ourselves. That's not the same thing as ignoring your requests. Let's keep going. I'm trying to be fair with this. And yeah, I ain't playing devil's advocate. I'm living in the Russia hysteria nonsense in the United States. You guys are a client state. You can imagine that I am also sort of dubious of the things that your government says in the same way I'm dubious of the things my government says, especially when they're positioning you from the standpoint of conflict. I am doubly skeptical when it's the standpoint of conflict and they're trying to gin up some kind of escalation in some way. Let's take a look at, let her finish.
Mr. Speaker, the House will recall that following the murder of Mr. Litvinenko, the UK expelled 4 diplomats. Under the Vienna Convention, the United Kingdom will now expel 23 Russian diplomats who have been identified as undeclared intelligence officers. They have just 1 week to leave. This will be the single biggest expulsion for over 30 years, and it reflects the fact that this is not the first time that the Russian state has acted against our country. Through these expulsions, we will fundamentally degrade Russian intelligence capability in the UK for years to come. And if they seek to rebuild it, we will prevent them from doing so. Second, we will urgently develop proposals for new legislative powers to harden our defences against all forms of hostile state activity.
There it is. There it is. There it is. Oh, there it is. There it is. There it is. There's pretext, and then there's we need to do XYZ for that pretext. There's a problem. In order to solve that problem, we need more powers. The government needs to take more powers. We need new legislation. We need to be more muscular. We need to be able to take away rights. We need to be able to use certain powers now that we need to put into law that we can use to repress the citizenry. There it is. There it is. That's what we're talking about. When they're telling you that something is wrong and they're screaming to you that, oh my God, we're under attack, they do that because that's really the only time that the government is going to get powers like that. Otherwise, they couldn't justify putting through some of the most god-awful legislation that they could put through. The National Defense Authorization Act was put through with this idea of terrorism, stripping away powers from American citizens, unraveling certain parts of the Bill of Rights. They can put you through a FISA court. They can strip away your Fourth Amendment rights in a secret court in America. Think about that. 99.7% of the requests they get for FISA warrants are approved. That means your Fourth Amendment is null and void. Null and void. They can put military on the United States soil if they want to call it some kind of terrorist activity. Now, mind you, the idea of a terrorist is extremely sketchy. We, when we're bombing other countries, are terrorists in that country. When they are dropping bombs in our country, they are terrorists. Terrorists is relative to the person, to the government itself. The government has the determination on the capability of making anybody a terrorist just by saying you're working against the government's interests. I will be very careful with accepting legislation that these guys could use against you. They could use it against you. It's only a name change. It's a trick of English. What I'm calling something now, yes, I may intend it to do X, but I can use it to do Y. I'm just saying, I would look very careful at what she's proposing from the standpoint of the powers that she wants to enact and whether those powers can be used against your own public. Let's keep going.
This will include the addition of a targeted power to detain those suspected of hostile state activity at the UK border. This power is currently only permitted in relation to those suspected of terrorism.
I would be very careful and I would look at that bill closely. That's all I'm saying. I'm warning you as your darker brother in the other country. look at what the proposal very carefully of what she's putting forward and whether those things can be used against you by just by trick of English, just a change of English, whether they can be used to harness that power of the state against the citizens of that country. Let's take a look at the uproar. Britain is braced for retaliation from Moscow after Theresa May blamed the Russian state for the Salisbury poisoning and announced the expulsion of 23 Russian diplomats and a crackdown on corrupt elites. The Prime Minister told the House of Commons the Kremlin had responded with sarcasm, contempt, and defiance to the 24-hour deadline the government set on Monday for explaining the attack on former spy Sergei Skripal. Their response has demonstrated a complete disdain for the gravity of these events, May told the MPs. There is no alternative conclusion other than the Russian state was responsible for the attempted murder of Mr. Skripal and his daughter. No other conclusion, huh? Zero other conclusion. Skripal remains in critical condition after the incident in Salisbury last week. Analysis carried out by the government experts has found that former spy and his daughter, Yulia, were exposed to a banned nerve agent likely to have been manufactured in Russia. Likely. According to their experts. May announced the government would take a series of measures, including cutting high-level diplomatic contact, strengthening powers to detain suspected intelligence agents at the border, and expelling 23 undeclared intelligence agents. That is the largest such move since the Cold War and marks a considerable escalation in the expulsion of 4 diplomats and the murder of Alexander Levatniko in 2007. They're also canceling visits to the World Cup by the royal family. Russian ambassador to the UK, Alexander Yakenkovo, had earlier confirmed the British diplomats would be expelled from Moscow in retaliation. Asking an interview with Sky News about what would happen in May's statement, Yakenko said, there will be expulsions. As you understand, in a diplomatic practice, there will be answers from Russia's side. When he was asked to clarify if this meant British diplomats being expelled from Moscow, he replied, in diplomacy, there is always reciprocity. He also said that what the UK government was doing was absolutely unacceptable, and that there she referred the matter to the Organization for Prohibition of Controlled Substances. And he's right, chemical weapons. He's right, by the way. You should have an international body doing this. You're taking it unilaterally, saying this other country did this. You should have some kind of arbiter to make that point. Yakenko also said that the UK government was doing absolutely, well, I say that part. The Russian embassy in London appeared to brush off the seriousness of the situation, tweeting, the temperature of Russia-UK relations drops to -23, but we cannot afford, but we are not afraid of cold weather. But we're not afraid of the cold weather. May's comment statement followed an announcement from the Foreign Office of the UK had called an urgent meeting with the UN Security Council to update members on the investigation. EU leaders will also discuss the incident at a summit next week with the European Council President Donald Tusk. Maniac Nikki Haley, the United States ambassador to the United Nations, said, the United States stand in absolute solidarity with Great Britain. The United States believes that Russia is responsible for the attacks on 2 people in the United Kingdom using a military-grade agent. I love how they just assert this shit. Britain hasn't even finished its investigation yet. How are all these people asserting this stuff? How? And don't misunderstand me. As a country, you're sovereign borders. You have to do things to protect your borders. I don't take issue with them doing that. I don't take issue with them even expelling the diplomats per se, if they honestly believe what's taken place. I guess my feeling is you're outright accusing another country of doing something. There are organizing bodies that go with this idea of coming to an investigation. I don't think it's insane at all to say that if you're accusing me of something, I get to challenge the evidence of the thing that you're accusing me of. Come on. This shit, man. Like, in the U.S., and again, my perspective on this is because they've been accusing Russia for God knows how long in the U.S. of all sorts of stuff. And it's gotten comically ridiculous. If you lived here, you would see how ridiculous some of the stuff they're saying is. So it makes me immensely skeptical about this other stuff. And it sounds to me the other day that it was likely, today she's saying it is a flat fact. almost. So what changed within those 2 days? And then asking the question of, hey, let us see the evidence itself. We want to see what you guys are using for it. The Democratic Party hid their servers. Oh, we don't want the FBI to review our servers. We don't want that to take place. Everybody else is reviewing the information from CrowdStrike, a source that the Democratic Party paid. Now, they're blaming Russia for something, and the FBI haven't even looked at the servers. You can understand my skepticism on this. You're hiding the ball. If you're telling me that this ball was spiked, I want to see the ball. You're saying that I did it. I damn sure want to see the ball to know whether or not your evidence of this and what you're saying about this is valid. That's what I'm getting at. You had George Bush saying there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and everybody's basing it off the shitty evidence that the United States was using for this particular ploy. Understand my cynicism. That's my point. That's kind of the point I'm getting at. This is not a defense of Russia or anything else. This is a defense of this idea of, here we have again a government accusing another government of doing something, when in prior situations those governments have either lied or been magnificently incompetent, or some level of both. The UK comes out and says Russia did something. Great. The UK starts to take changes in order to deal with the issue that they think Russia did. Okay, great. And then she comes out and says, they did it. They're the culprit. Russia's response, okay, show us the thing that you say we've done. Yes, they're joking. You guys are comically ridiculous. But show us what you say we've done. Give us the evidence. Show us what you're using as evidence. It is very possible that Russia did it. My point to this is, they haven't done an investigation. And to the rest of the world should be able to see the information and make the determination. All of this is done purely in-house, internal, unilaterally by Britain pointing. If you're bringing other nations into this, shouldn't those other nations have something to go on just by Britain's word? And in any other situation, that seems like that would be the case. Bob said that Sue robbed her. That's great. Now, you can be friends with Bob, and you can try to take Bob's word for it, but do you really know that Bob is right? And shouldn't you take that somewhere to a court of law instead of just beating the shit out of Sue? Meaning, once you bring other people into the mix, shouldn't those other people have something more to go on than just the word of Bob? I don't look at this stuff from the standpoint of any particular country. I like Britain as a country. It's one of my favorite countries. If I'm being honest, I cover British politics. I don't like war. I don't like escalating on this stuff, and I know that governments lie. I add those two things together and say I need a little bit more credibility involved in this process as opposed to you just asserting stuff. I don't believe just in your assertions. If you're right, then other people should be able to evaluate that evidence to show that you're right. And let's be honest, you're not an independent actor. You're a client state of the United States, that exact same United States that have been screaming at the top of its lungs about Trump and Russia. I'm sorry, I'm immensely skeptical of this. I'm not saying Russia didn't do it, but I'm also not saying they did it. And that's the difference in the way I'm looking at the story as opposed to the way that she's screaming about the story. Let's keep going in the article. Valesy Nebenzia, the Russian envoy to the UN, told the council, no scientific research or development under the title Novichok were carried out. Nebenzia alleged that Salisbury poisoning was a false flag attack, possibly by the UK itself, intended to tarnish Russia. Most probable source of this agent are the countries that have carried out the research on these weapons, including Britain. He's saying Britain did it to itself. Britain or the United States did it to itself. The White House said that shared Britain's assessment that Russia was responsible for the nerve agent and supported the decision to expel British diplomats. Well, yeah, because Britain is a client state, of course. That doesn't really tell you anything. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn also stressed the need to involve the OPCW, which is based in The Hague, in investigations that occurred an appalling act of violence, he said. Nerve agents are abominable if used in war. It is utterly reckless to use them in a civilian environment. Yes, I agree. Bring in a third party. Like, you're talking about multiple countries at this point. The assertions of one country can't be taken as the word of God. If you want these other countries involved, and if you want these other countries to believe you, they need to see evidence and not just your evidence. This is the same rule I'm using for the DNC hiding its computers from the FBI when it's screaming at the top of its lungs about a hack. Some of the Labour MPs offered the Prime Minister more unequivocal backing, as did the Scottish National Party Westminster leader Ian Blackford, who said, "There has to be a robust response to the use of terror on our streets. We must act in a measured way to show that we will simply not tolerate this behavior." You have not even had an investigation. Jesus Christ. Fuck the evidence. I have a great idea on what to do. Corbyn's cautious response was found an echo in Paris by Emmanuel Macron spokesman Benjamin Griveaux, saying it was too early for Paris to decide whether action should be taken. Thank you. Thank you. We don't do fantasy politics. Once the elements are proven, then will be time to come for a decision to be made, he told reporters. Griveaux said France was waiting for definitive conclusions and the evidence that the facts were completely true before taking a position. Good job, France. That's called sanity. That's called a sane response. I want to wait till the evidence is in before we just jump to a fucking conclusion. That's amazing. And do you know the Blairites are using this to attack Jeremy Corbyn on this? They're using this to attack Corbyn on this. So, yeah. Yeah. Let's see who's here. We have people here on this. Let's see. Might be a fake Corbyn supporter. Stephen Brinson. Let it burn. Hard to boast about having the greatest democracy in the world if you start a war that nobody but the brainwashed and elite wanted. I know, right? We were willing to kill Cubans and Floridians in order to start a war with, not to mention, a airplane that we were going to go with this idea that the Soviet Union shot it down in order to start a war with Russia, the Soviet Union. I just want to make this point clear. How we look at the world is fundamentally different than how these guys look at the world. There are some bad intentions out there, let's say it that way. And the person who drew up a war plan to do that in Cuba, that person is not singular to the United States. That's all I'm saying. And to make the point clear, if they would have done that, if they would have carried that out, the news media would have said, oh my God, look what took place. Fidel Castro did this. We need to say something about Castro. Anybody who said anything against it will be like, oh, those guys are conspiracy theorists saying that it didn't happen. This is shit they think about. All I'm saying is, it should be investigated. Not saying Russia did it. Not saying they didn't do it. I'm not saying any of those things. I'm saying it should be investigated. And you shouldn't jump to conclusions and immediately point the finger at another country when you haven't even done an investigation. What Jeremy Corbyn's saying here is accurate. Give it to the international body and let them investigate it before we come to a conclusion. People can't necessarily buy the conclusions of one nation because nations and people in those nations lie. They have internal political politics that pushes issues a particular way. The international community should not just outright trust the things that any individual nation says. Whether that's the United States, whether that's Britain, whether that's anywhere. Especially when Britain is a client state of the United States. And the United States have been pushing this Russian hysteria like nobody's business. Put that shit in context. That's what I'm saying. Giving this to some level of an international body that has expertise in investigating it makes all the sense in the world. Good job, friends. Good job, Corbyn. Good job, both of you guys. Fucking A. Alright, so I'm not going to keep this one going long because I got to be honest, I still feel kind of crappy from last night. I'm going to end this. I may do one more after this just to get my quota in for today, but I'll see you guys shortly. Thanks, guys.